Well, what do you make of this new weird thing, rather pathetic thing, if you ask me? This whole nexus of post-leftists who have now sort of gotten together with MAGA, but they insist, oh no, we're a little different, but also we're going to go do events that like sort of prop up MAGA. Of course, I'm thinking about, you got your Tulsi Gabbards, you got your RFKs, you got your Russell Brands, you got your Jimmy Dores, you got this Brett Weinstein, he was never leftist, but like this Rescue the Republic. I'm sure you guys saw that. And it's this very strange thing that happened. And I can't help but say, to me, it looks like these people are rushing to get a ticket and hop on the Titanic right before it hits the iceberg, right? Yeah. Like and when these people had plausible deniability about their politics, about, oh yeah, I'm a lefty, I swear, I'm a lefty. When there was a plausible deniability there, they were more popular. But as soon as it became like the support for Trump became overt and apparent, then all of a sudden it's like the same thing happened with Dave Rubin. Like then zero, and people have zero interest in what they're selling because it went from, oh, they're a lefty who's criticizing Democrats and leftists and liberals all the time. That's really interesting. Let me see what they're saying. And then now it's like, here they are, Rescue the Republic, and they're doing some weird. Russell Brand was doing some weird public prayer. Every event he goes to now, he does some weird public prayer. He's
that dude loves to get in his tidy whities and
taking pictures in his tidy whities.
Be the center of attention.
Bro, he has not been in the allegations, taking pictures in his tidy whities and posting them on social media with him trying to baptize.
Bro, he hasn't been beating the allegations for about 4 years now.
That's right, yeah. So what do you make of that weird nexus of post-leftist and MAGA and like how sort of just pathetic it is?
I mean, we talk a lot about it on the channel. We've discussed it at length. And what I really do believe it is the end result of audience capture, specifically with someone like Jimmy Dore, because Jimmy, I think he really got distracted by the shiny object that was the vaccine, the anti-vax grift. He probably made a ton of money off of that. It's what got his channel over 1 million subscribers. It was, I think, around the similar time that your channel, Kyle, was kind of declining in viewership. It was that weird time after the Bernie era had ended, and it was like, I guess, where's the energy at right now? Nobody knows. The principled people like yourself, you kind of stuck the course. I'm going to stay principled and say what I believe, regardless of whether or not it's making me a ton of money or getting a ton of views. But Jimmy, again, can't handle the waning attention, so goes for this anti-vax grift, makes a ton of money. But that's a fleeting moment. That's a couple years at most, and it's basically over now. Unfortunately, what I talk about when I say the end result of audience capture is that there's an interesting sort of, irony here. Donald Trump, the person that most of these anti-vax people support, is the guy who did Operation Warp Speed. He's the one who did the lockdowns. He's the one who didn't fire Fauci like they would have liked him to, right? He's the guy responsible for all this stuff that they've spent the last couple of years pretending is the most evil, nefarious conspiracy that's ever been inflicted on the people of this country, right? But now all of a sudden, Donald Trump should be back in charge, and no one's addressing the fact that he was the one responsible for all that stuff that you just spent 2 or 3 years hand-wringing about and pearl clutching about and, raising the alarms. It's absolutely crazy. And again, a lot of them won't go full Trump. I think Jimmy, he won't straight up put on the MAGA hat. And it leaves him in this weird position where it's like, you got to kind of go all the way or not at all. And you can't just be halfway off the cliff.
I do have to point out, though, because I saw this clip floating around social media, he made a very clear argument that he thinks Donald Trump is, and I quote, out-lefting Kamala Harris, which is literally the single dumbest thing I've ever heard anywhere on the internet, in real life, etc. I don't think it's possible for an honest human being to believe that, to feel that way. Any objective analysis of their policies, what they say they want to do, what they've done in the past, etc., any objective analysis is going to say Kamala Harris is a corporate centrist liberal and Donald Trump is a fascist, right?
Yeah.
So you can't. Krystal, maybe you can weigh in on this. Like, what is it? I don't think you can make, if you're being honest, you can't make that point. So it's obviously a grift. It's obviously, I'm going to hop on this contrarian bandwagon and do my whole tap dance about how what does it all come down to? What's the connecting tissue? We hate Democrats. We hate liberals. Like, that's the main connecting tissue between the Russell Brands, the Jordan Petersons, the Jimmy Dores, et cetera. Right?
Yeah.
It's also the most sought after content on YouTube.
Correct. And it is like, yeah, your entire politics are just, I hate liberals. Like, that's your whole politics. And so if Republicans are in opposition to liberals, then, hey, let me put on the MAGA hat. Let me be there.
Yeah. So I think that
smart guess.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what it boils down to. Yeah, wow. Pretty trippy. Amazing to be back on Krystal Kyle and Friends. But I thought the point that we finished on in that clip is the most prescient one, right? Not to pat ourselves on the back too hard, but that's our favorite thing to do on this very podcast, right? We react to a lot of content. This is one of the first times we're reacting to ourselves. And boy, not only are we handsome, but we're sharp as tacks, Gavin. But look, the most sought after content on YouTube is I hate liberal content. Look at how cringe these libs are. Oh my gosh, Trump is based, right? Trump is based is fading, but the liberals are cringe is always an evergreen. There's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for anyone willing to, circle the drain and reach for it. Anyway, yeah, that's what's happening. That's why these guys go for it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that also, I believe it was Kyle in that clip that made the point that, like, as they get closer to just being standard, straight up Republicans, people start to not care as much, right? It's like, yeah, this grift is very, very profitable for a little bit, but it's also kind of a short-lived grift. It's kind of tough to ride it into a serious, like, next phase of your career, again, because you get this, like, sugar high, which can last up to 4 or 5 years. Tulsi Gabbard, you know what I'm talking about? She did the whole, like, I'm leaving the left, I'm leaving the Democrats, I'm going on Tucker. But then now it's like, now that she's just a MAGA Republican, does anyone care about anything that Tulsi Gabbard has to say? I mean, seriously, when was the last time Tulsi Gabbard said anything that was newsworthy or that was interesting or that triggered people? Like, I literally can't remember the last time Tulsi Gabbard was able to have that effect. We talked about Jimmy Dore in the same way in a very recent video. He's experiencing the same thing. He can't control the discourse anymore. He can't piss people off. And if you're going to have this brand as a contrarian, you kind of got to be able to piss people off, because if you can't, and if everyone just laughs at you and ignores you, then again, it's not edgy. And it's not even triggering the lips. So you're just like a boring sideshow at that point. So I think, when you are in the middle of that grift, like I said, when you're at the beginning of it and you're switching and you're making that pivot, it is very interesting and very exciting content for people on that side that you're pandering to. Because again, it's like, oh, wow, this was someone that used to criticize us. This used to be one of our haters. And now they're saying what we want to hear. Isn't this awesome?
You were right all along.
Yep. So again, you get that nice sugar high, 4 or 5 years at most, but I do think it takes a really talented and sophisticated commentator to actually make it work in a long-term way before you just fade into irrelevance like Dave Rubin has, like Tulsi Gabbard has, and like Jimmy Dore is currently.
Yeah, I think that's why we saw when we reacted to it the other day when Destiny calls out Kim Iverson and is like, oh, you're just a right winger. And she's like, I am not a right winger. Don't you ever call me a right winger. I just agree with the right on every issue. Okay. But I'm a leftist. Don't you ever call me a right winger. And why? Because she knows that that's the commodity that she's become, right? She has become the lefty that the right wing agrees with it. Otherwise, you don't have a cheat code anymore. Otherwise, you're not standing on stilts, right? You know what I'm saying? You have to compete with the Daily Wire. You have to compete with Tucker Carlson. You have to compete with Sean Hannity. You have to compete with all of the, right-wing new age podcasters that are really popular with young kids, right? You're not going to be of value anymore. You have to go out and compete earnestly, which you were clearly incapable of doing in the first place. That's why you grifted into the lane that you found yourself in, right? People who can compete, people who can forge their own path, like Krystal and Kyle, right? Mm-hmm. Kyle had absolutely no benefits. He just made videos from his grandma's basement, and everybody was like, this dude's spitting. I think I'll watch him. And now he has 1 million YouTube subscribers. That's how you know you have the gift of gab, as they say, and he's a real political analyst, right? I'm not sure about how Krystal got her gig at MSNBC, but she built Rising Up from scratch, okay? You know what I'm saying? There's people with natural talent, and they get to actually be honest. And what's really remarkable about Russell Brand is because of his, sexual malfeasance, right? And he knows if he ever gets too big in the mainstream public eye again, he could go to jail like Harvey Weinstein or P. Diddy. And I think he knows that it's still not, like, he's not out of the woodwork yet. So he wants to be deeply embedded in the evangelical community because they will spend infinite resources on keeping his ass out of jail. I'm not kidding, guys. I think that's where it's at, because you don't end up in this position when you have real talent like Russell does, unless you have your back up against a wall. It's humiliating for a guy like him.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's definitely interesting. I also think that something I wish I'd brought up on that Krystal Kyle episode that I was thinking a little bit about last night. I feel like the Jimmy Dores of the world, that whole crowd, they kind of had a moment specifically when Tucker was still on Fox News, right? Tucker's not on Fox News anymore. And obviously he still has a following. He, I think, has one of the #1 podcasts in the entire country on the different, podcasting platforms, Spotify, whatever. He sells out arenas, goes around doing his stupid speaking tour and stuff like that. But, I do think it's fair to say that when people like Jimmy had that ability to get on Fox News, to get on that very mainstream platform like Tucker Carlson. Same with Tulsi. I feel like that really was providing them a boost that is just gone away now. It doesn't exist because it's the same thing that happened with Tucker. Like I said, Tucker is still very popular online, but he also doesn't control the discourse anymore at all.
Like, he's not headline worthy.
Exactly.
It's like Alex Jones. Alex Jones may have 40,000 people watching him. I don't know what the numbers were at the peak of InfoWars, but he wasn't generating headlines because it would be like, Alex Jones, who's that? What? And it does kind of highlight how insulated mainstream media is. Like the New York Times or the, whomever isn't going to write as much about Tucker because he's not being blasted out to
TV,
mainstream cable.
Yeah.
And even though mainstream cable is dying and it's reaching like a more and more narrow demographic, it still does matter.
Yeah. Then the thing about that is people always say like cable news is dying. No one watches cable news. Like only your grandpa watches cable news, or like maybe it's on at the freaking lobby of some business you're waiting for your pizza or something like that. That's where you see cable news. I actually push back on that, guys. Cable news is still incredibly relevant. Why? Because most people don't watch it on cable. Guess what? Fox News has a YouTube channel. MSNBC has a YouTube channel. All of these cable news companies, they have social medias too, and they blast out their content on those social medias. So yeah, Tucker videos were performing really well on YouTube. He was getting hundreds of thousands of views. Even without Tucker, Fox and all these cable news companies still get massive views on these platforms, YouTube platforms that are supposed to be for independent creators like us. But YouTube still recommends people cable news content. Here's a clip of Rachel Maddow. It's like, Jesus Christ, how are we supposed to compete with this? But either way, the point is, it is still incredibly relevant, even with the youth, because like I said, we're not watching cable news, but we're on our phones, and that shit gets blasted out onto social media. Tucker, in that era, again, had a massive amount of control over the discourse. He would say something crazy on Fox, people would clip it, put it on Twitter, and then everyone would melt down. Everyone would freak out. All the libs would get triggered. It was a whole thing. Nowadays, that just doesn't happen. And I mean, it's interesting because it's not like Tucker doesn't say stupid things anymore. He still has outrageous takes and dumb conversations with like Obama's ex-gay lover or whatever. But no one really cares. It's just kind of like, LOL.
That's a real story, by the way. He didn't make that up.
No, yeah, that Tucker. I mean, that guy might have made it up.
Oh,
but,
sure. No. Tucker ran that
the interview
story,
actually happened.
100% made up.
And I think proof of this, I think a big piece of proof of this that I'm increasingly fascinated by is it's not just Russell Brand who's really leaning into the evangelical Christian stuff. Tucker is too.
There's so much money there.
Tucker is increasingly talking about religion. He's talking about spirituality. He's bringing up these weird, like, biblical conspiracies about how actually the UFOs are of a spiritual nature. Maybe they're angels or some crap like that. Is it possible? And it's like, I don't think that I do think that Russell Brand is going to become a straight up televangelist, mega church pastor character. I don't think Tucker has the skill set necessarily. He's not as entertaining. He's not as much of a performer as Russell. So I don't think he'll actually become like a preacher, like a mega church preacher or anything like that. But it is interesting to see as you lose your relevance from that mainstream TV circuit and you get increasingly irrelevant, it almost seems inevitable that the next move is the religious pivot. And I'm really interested about, whether or not Jimmy Dore will go down that road. It's something we might ask Kyle about when he comes on the show on Monday.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of which, Kyle Kulinski himself, the man himself, secular of talk. Going to be joining us 1:30, 2:30, something like that. So hit the notification bell so you don't miss that Monday afternoon. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you that Russell Brand will 100% be doing the mega church thing. I think he'll be riding on PJs, and I think he'll be hanging out with Joel Osteen anytime now, because Joel Osteen's going to recognize that he can make even more money off of Russell, because Russell, it's sad to see his powers used for such evil, but he can be really funny. He's not Jimmy Dore, guys. He knows how to make people laugh. He knows how to manipulate a crowd. He is a natural. He is a once in a generation kind of a talent, guys. He genuinely is. It would be wrong to come out here and categorize him as anything other than that, guys. I always grew up admiring comedians, right? People who love to talk, people want to be seen, right? They become podcasters and they rope their best friend into doing it with them. I'm kidding mostly, but not really, right? I wanted to be as funny as Russell Brand. I wanted people to laugh when I talked like Russell Brand. I watched all of his stuff. I remember when he did the Brand X TV show. I already mentioned he hosted the VMAs and he gave a shout out for universal healthcare. He was like, I'm from London and we ain't got people dying on the streets because they ain't got their health insurance. And this was like 2008. It was a big conversation point in America, and I was like, based Russell, like, it's sad to see him go the way he went.
More sad than even Jimmy, because like you said, Russell was genuinely a talented comedian. Why do you think he got away with so much for so long? It's because the dude was funny.
It's 09, sorry, but yeah,
09. Either way, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't get away with as much as Russell Brand got away with throughout his career unless you're seriously charismatic.
Bro dressed up as Osama bin Laden and came to work at MTV after 9/11 when he was strung out on heroin and they fired his ass, and he came back and became even more famous.